Welcome to Cultural Conversations. I am your host, Courtney Crocker, and today we are going to be speaking with not only a cosmopolitan who has traveled over land and sea, but one who has mapped out epic travels on the pages of his books. You may well recognize his now classic works of Lord Jim and Heart of Darkness. Joseph Conrad was born Joseph Theodor Konrad Korzenowski to a Polish family of moderate means and became one of the greatest English novelists despite not learning the language until in his 20s. English was in fact his third fluent language after Polish and French, but is the language that most of his novels and stories were written in. Conrad has admitted that much of his work has biographical aspects, but we will try to learn more about his life and his works in this interview. Now please welcome Joseph Conrad back from the dead specifically to grace us with his presence after 87 years in the afterlife. Welcome, Mr. Conrad. We are pleased to meet you, and we would like to open up our time by asking you to reflect on your life for us and tell us how you view your contribution to literature.
It is better for mankind to be impressionable than reflective. Nothing humanely great, I mean, as affecting a whole mass of lives, has come from reflection. On the other hand, you cannot fail to see the power of mere words, such words as glory, for instance, or pity. I won't mention any more. They are not far to seek. Shouted with perseverance, with ardor, with conviction, these two by their sounds alone have set whole nations in motion and upheaved the dry ground on which rests our whole social fabric. I know that a novelist lives in his work. He stands there, the only reality in an invented world, among imaginary things, happenings, and people. Writing about them, he is only writing about himself. But the disclosure is not complete. He remains, to a certain extent, a figure behind the veil, a suspected rather than a seen presence, a movement and a voice behind the draperies of fiction. Those who read me know my convictions that the world, the temporal world, rests on very few simple ideas, so simple that they must be as old as the hills. It rests notably, among others, on the idea of fidelity. At a time when nothing which is not revolutionary in some way or other can expect to attract much attention, I have not been revolutionary in my writings. The revolutionary spirit is mighty convenient in this, that it frees one from all scruples as regards ideas. Its hard, absolute optimism is repulsive to my mind by the menace of fanaticism and intolerance it contains. No doubt one should smile at these things, but imperfect aesthete, I am no better philosopher.
I believe that many of us can tell that your life at sea and experiences among many disparate cultures has greatly influenced your work. But can you tell us, Mr. Conrad, where your ideas came from? Can you explain how your own cosmopolitan lifestyle has impacted your writing?
It was in the front sitting room of furnished apartments in a Pimlico square that they first began to live again, with a vividness and poignancy quite foreign to our former real intercourse. I had been treating myself to a long stay on shore, and in the necessity of occupying my mornings, Almayer, that old acquaintance, came noble to the rescue. Before long, as was only proper, his wife and daughter joined him around my table, and then the rest of that Pantai band came full of words and gestures. Unknown to my respectable landlady, it was my practice directly after my breakfast to hold animated receptions of Malays, Arabs, and half-castes. They did not clamor aloud for my attention. They came with a silent and irresistible appeal, and the appeal, I affirm here, was not to my self-love or my vanity. It seems now to have had a moral character, for why should the memory of these beings, seen in their obscure sun-bathed existence, demand to express itself in the shape of a novel, except on the grounds of that mysterious fellowship which unites in a community of hopes and fears all the dwellers on this earth? I did not receive my visitors with boisterous rapture, as the bearers of any gifts of profit or fame. There was no vision of a printed book before me as I sat writing at the table situated in a decayed part of Belgravia. After all these years, each leaving its evidence of slowly blackened pages, I can honestly say that it is a sentiment akin to pity which prompted me to render in words, assembled with conscientious care, the memory of things far distant and of men who had lived.
You mentioned that the memories of the people you met spoke to you and influenced your writing. But when did you first know that you wanted to travel and encounter these men and women whom you would later use as inspiration for your writing?
It was in 1868, when 9 years old or thereabouts, that while looking at a map of Africa of the time, and putting my finger on the blank space then representing the unsolved mysteries of that continent, I said to myself with absolute assurance and an amazing audacity which is no longer part of my nature, when I grow up, I shall go there. And of course, I thought no more about it till after a quarter of a century or so, an opportunity offered to go there, as if the sin of childish audacity were to be visited on my mature head. Yes, I did go there, there being the region of Stanley Falls, which in '68 was the blankest of blank spaces on the Earth's configured surface. I dare say I am compelled, unconsciously compelled, now to write volume after volume, as in past years I was compelled to go to sea voyage after voyage. Leaves must follow upon one another as leagues used to follow in the days gone by, on and on to the appointed end, which, being truth itself, is one for all man and for all occupations. Only in men's imagination does every truth find an effective and undeniable existence. Imagination, not invention, is the supreme master of art as life. An imaginative and exact rendering of authentic memories may serve worthily that spirit of piety toward all things human which sanctions the conceptions of a writer of tales and the emotions of the man reviewing his own experience.
Obviously, your desire to travel started young, though your journeys did not. How easily were you able to adapt to the different environments in which you lived and passed through?
I have fed on the emblematical animal, which in the language of the volatile Gauls is called la vache enragée. I have lived on ancient salt junk. I know the taste of shark, of trepang, of snake, of nondescript dishes containing things without a name. But of the Lithuanian village dog, never. I wish to be distinctly understood that it is not I, but my granduncle Nicholas of the Polish land gentry, who in his young days had eaten the Lithuanian dog. I wish he had not. The childish horror of the deed clings absurdly to the grizzled man. I am perfectly helpless against it. Still, if he really had to, let us charitably remember that he had eaten him on active service, while bearing up bravely against the greatest military disaster of modern history, and, in a manner, for the sake of his country. He had eaten him to appease his hunger, no doubt, but also for the sake of an unappeasable and patriotic desire, in the glow of a great faith that lives still, and in the pursuit of a great illusion kindled like a false beacon by a great man to lead astray the efforts of a brave nation. Looked at in that light, it appears a sweet and decorous meal. And looked at in the same light, my own diet of la vache enragée appears a fatuous and extravagant form of self-indulgence. For why should I, the son of a land which such men as these have turned up with their plowshares and bedewed with their blood, undertake the pursuit of fantastic meals of salt junk and hardtack upon the wide seas? On the kindest view, it seems an unanswerable question. Alas, I have the conviction that there are men of unstained rectitude who are ready to murmur scornfully the word desertion. Thus the taste of innocent adventure may be made bitter to the palate. The part of the inexplicable should be allowed for the appraising of the conduct of men in a world where no explanation is final. No charge of faithlessness ought to be lightly uttered. The appearances of this perishable life are deceptive, like everything that falls under the judgment of our imperfect senses. The inner voice may remain true enough in its secret counsel. The fidelity to a special tradition may last through the events of an unrelated existence, following faithfully to the traced ways of an inexplicable impulse.
You have as many interesting tales as your novels, no doubt. Well, Mr. Conrad, we are almost out of time. Thank you for sharing some of your thoughts and experiences, motivations, and inspirations. Do you have anything you would like to leave us with?
To survey with wonder the changes of one's own self is a fascinating pursuit for idle hours. The field is so wide, the surprises so varied, the subject so full of unprofitable but curious hints as to the work of unseen forces, that one does not weary easily of it. I am not speaking here of megalomaniacs who rest uneasy under the crown of their unbounded conceit, who really never rest in this world, and when out of it go on fretting and fuming on the straitened circumstances of their last habitation, where all men must lie in obscure equality. Neither am I thinking of those ambitious minds who, always looking forward to some aim of aggrandizement, can spare no time for a detached, impersonal gaze upon themselves. And that's a pity. They are unlucky, these two kinds, together with the much larger band of the totally unimaginative, of those unfortunate beings in whose empty and unseeing gaze, as a French writer has put it, the whole universe vanishes into blank nothingness, miss perhaps the true task of us men whose day is short on this earth, the abode of conflicting opinions. The ethical view of the universe involves us at last in so many cruel and absurd contradictions, where the last vestiges of faith, hope, charity, and even reason itself seem ready to perish, that I have come to suspect that the aim of creation cannot be ethical at all. I would fondly believe that its object is purely spectacular, a spectacle for awe, love, adoration, or hate, if you like, but in this view, and in this view alone, never for despair. Those visions, delicious or poignant, are a moral end in themselves. The rest is our affair: the laughter, the tears, the tenderness, the indignation, the high tranquillity of a steeled heart, the detached curiosity of a subtle mind. That's our affair. And the unwearied self-forgetful attention to every phase of the living universe reflected in our consciousness may be our appointed task on this earth, a task in which fate has perhaps engaged nothing of us except our conscience, gifted with a voice in order to bear true testimony to the visible wonder, the haunting terror, the infinite passion, and the illimitable serenity, to the supreme law and the abiding mystery of the sublime
Thank you
spectacle.
again, Mr. Conrad, for your time. I am sure that we will be looking for evidence of your own amazing life when we read your works next. This has been another successful cultural conversation, and we look forward to meeting another cosmopolitan next week. Thank you.